I'm forgetting. Something important. Something's not right!
Easy now. First things first. What's your name?
I am a huge fan of the first Allan Wake game, and like a lot of you, I've been waiting for years for a sequel to it. And Allan Wake 2 finally came out today, and I've been playing it for the vast majority of the day, and I feel like I'm ready to talk about it with you guys, give you guys my first impressions to this game. This is going to be a first impressions review, but after I beat Allan Wake in its entirety within the next few days, I'm going to release a follow-up to this video, so you should consider subscribing if you're interested in seeing my final thoughts on the game. Sometimes I'm lucky with the algorithm when I release these videos day of release, but when it comes to my follow-up videos, they're mainly for subscribers, so again, subscribing will make sure you get to watch it. And also, I talk about survival horror video games all the time on this page. Just the other day, I think 2 days ago, I released a review for Stray Souls, but I've also reviewed Resident Evil 4 Remake, Dead Space Remake, Callisto Protocol, Grey Hill Incident, Amnesia the Bunker. I just love horror gaming, and it's a huge focus on this channel. But I also talk about TV shows, movies, and I do trailer reactions, but 90% of what I talk about on this page is in the genre of horror. But anyway, enough with the self-promo. I'm going to show you some raw gameplay. Let's talk about Allan Wake 2. So I want to stress once again, this is a first impressions review. This isn't a review of the entire game, but in my opinion, first impressions reviews are still important because if you're anything like me, you want to know that a game is good from the start. When you spend your money, as soon as you sit down on the couch or in front of your PC or wherever you game, you want to know that you're going to have fun. You don't want to know you'll have fun in 30 or 40 hours. You want to know you're going to have fun from the start. And this is going to be the most first impressions review that I've ever done, because when it comes to Allan Wake 2, this game is a slow burn and it takes its time to reveal itself to you fully. And that's not a bad thing, and I'll get more into that in a bit. But just know that everything that I'm saying here, all the gameplay you're seeing, all the story elements that I'm going to talk about are from pretty early on in the game, and I have a very, very strong feeling that this game is going to change and evolve. But once I beat Allan Wake 2, I am going to do a final impressions review where I talk about the game in its entirety and my thoughts having beaten the entire thing. So consider subscribing if you want to see that follow-up video as well. But also, there will be light spoilers. I'm not going to get too in-depth about the plot. So first, I'm going to talk about the pros of Allan Wake 2, and there are a lot of pros. First, I want to talk about the narrative. Again, I'm not going to get too in-depth into the story because, one, I'm pretty early in the game once again, and two, I don't think I'm capable of really explaining to you the plot of this game. But it's incredibly engaging, and it's probably the best narrative for me personally in a video game in a very, very, very long time. I kept finding myself saying 20 more minutes, 20 more minutes, 20 more minutes, because I was just so excited to see where the narrative led, what secrets were going to be unraveled. It was almost torture for me to stop playing just to record this review. But the story begins with you playing as Saga Anderson. She's an FBI agent, and she's going to Bright Falls to investigate cult-like murders that have been happening around the area. And of course, as you're investigating, as you're figuring out what happens, you realize that there's ties to Allan Wake in the events of the first game. And Saga is actually really fun to play as. I know a lot of people were kind of nervous that half of this game would be played from the perspective of a new character, but for me, I'm really, really, really enjoying this character. So far, I find her character to be incredibly likable, and the mystery that she gets sucked into has me on the edge of my seat. She has this gameplay mechanic called the mind space. As you're playing through the plot, uncovering the mystery and unraveling more clues, you get to go to her mind space, which is basically a visual representation of her mind. It looks like a cozy log cabin, but all the clues that you discover, all the weird shit that you find, you get to put on a bulletin board, and you get to try and unravel the mystery alongside the main characters. I just think it's really, really fun. But also in that mind space area is where you can read the manuscript pages, you can upgrade your weapons, you can listen to radio broadcasts, podcast you previously heard. And obviously, you also get to play as Allan Wake in Allan Wake 2, no surprises there. But you can tell when it comes to the Allan Wake sections of this game, it's where the developers really innovated, where they added a lot of new and interesting gameplay mechanics. Not that they didn't do anything special with Saga's gameplay, but when it comes to playing as her, it's more of the traditional Allan Wake gameplay experience, so to speak. But when you're playing as Allan Wake himself is when the game just gets extra weird and extra wacky. And the narrative specifically around Allan Wake 2 is also where they just went batshit crazy with it. The narrative, it's so meta, it's weird, it breaks the fourth wall. It's really, really strange. And I'm, again, not going to get into it here, but it's just bizarre.
Well played, man. That is spot on. Playing the role here. Pretending the world of the book overlaps our own. That's very meta indeed. You see, Initiation tells the story of a fictional writer named Allan Wake, who is trapped in a nightmare, desperately trying to find the manuscript of a novel he has forgotten he has written. The book is set in New York, but it might not be New York at all.
It's been a while since I played the first Allan Wake game in its entirety. I played it through on the Xbox 360 in probably 2012, 2013 possibly. But I played through half of the game again when it got remastered for the PS4 in 2021. So that was still a couple years ago. But I never finished it on that playthrough. So I'm not fully remembering the plot of Allan Wake 1. Obviously, I did watch some recap videos on YouTube. But when it comes to the narrative of Allan Wake 2, I'm not fully lost. I can still very much enjoy the story, but I can tell that this probably would be blowing my mind even more if I was more well-versed in the lore of not only Allan Wake 1, but other Remedy games as well. And here's where I might say what many might consider to be a major spoiler, but you do learn this very, very, very early on in the game. But there's a lot of references and Easter eggs to other Remedy games. But no way does this game rely on those connections, because the self-contained world of this game, of Bright Falls, is just so fun. I love seeing these mini open world-like areas with tons of optional stuff to do. From talking to random NPCs to get more details on the lore of the world or the town, or you talk to other characters in the game and you can unravel more mysteries and more clues, to just the optional puzzles that you find all over the place that give you rewards like upgrades to your characters. And I was also just fanboying out at seeing them recreate a lot of the original locations from the first Allan Wake game. Now I'm going to talk about combat. I'm going to say what a lot of people have already said and what is also very obvious. The combat is clearly inspired by the newer Resident Evil remakes, Resident Evil 2 remake, Resident Evil 3 remake, Resident Evil 4 remake. And that's not a bad thing, especially since when it really comes down to it, it still feels very much like the original Allan Wake game. You need to manage not only your ammo, but the batteries for your flashlight. You have to use your flashlight to defend yourself against enemies. You have to make use of street lights to protect you. It doesn't feel like they just copy and pasted Resident Evil remake gameplay into the world of Allan Wake. It feels like it's a 50-50 combination of both of those games, and the outcome is just incredible. And now I'm going to talk about some negatives, and if I'm being completely honest with you, I don't really have negatives for this game at all right now. But I'm going to go back to what I said in the beginning, where I said this game is a slow burn. That's not a negative. I think that's incredible. I love the pacing of the story, and it's really, really fun for a first playthrough. But I can already tell that right now, for me personally, it's gonna be a little bit of a drag playing through this game a second time because of how slow this game is and how long it takes to really get going. Now, obviously, everyone plays games differently. You might blow through this game a lot faster than I, but for me personally, I didn't kill my first enemy until almost 2.5 hours into the game. And you can probably see that represented in the gameplay footage that you're seeing now. I apologize that the gameplay footage is probably pretty boring compared to most survival horror games, but that's the pacing of the first few hours. A lot of walking around, a lot of investigating, and very minimal combat. But again, I'm not complaining right now because it's incredible, especially for a first playthrough. The narrative is on point. The world building is on point. I love practically every character that's been introduced so far. The sound design is some of the best in a horror game ever. Another minor nitpick is that a lot of the gameplay footage that you're seeing here takes place in the woods. It is the Pacific Northwest, obviously. There's a lot of woods, and I don't hate that this game takes place in the woods, but I play a lot of survival horror games, and I'm personally kind of getting tired of huge sections of gameplay taking place in the woods. The woods are starting to become like sewer sections of survival horror games. I know how a lot of people complain how almost every survival horror game has a sewer section. I feel that way towards the woods. Well, there you have it. There's my first impressions for Allan Wake 2. Have you played the game yet? If so, what are you thinking about it so far? But you know, be thoughtful. Don't spoil anything in the comments for anyone. And once again, consider subscribing, and thank you for watching, especially if you watch this far.